Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Well, this is my first podcast, so it's not a video. But anyway, welcome guys. This is about poker strategy, what you guys should learn when you're starting out. Just a couple of different ideas as well. I'll just keep ranting on and then hopefully you guys find a few things really good and you guys are set up. So let's say you first start playing poker for the first time and you've just learned it. You might have beginner's luck. This is what absolutely drives people towards poker, because sometimes beginner's luck, we can beat everyone. Even the best players can lose against the worst players, and that's what luck is all about. So poker is usually based on skill versus luck, and that's the whole thing about it. And a lot of people have egos on the table, and it's really fun to have. And if someone's really full of themselves at the table and you don't like them because they know that they think they're better than you, well, that's the fun thing about poker, is you can actually still win the hand, and the cards can beat them. You don't have to actually beat them, the cards can work themselves. But anyway, how do we move on? So we need to work out what's important in poker when you're first starting out. One of the most important things is position. So this is the most important thing. So the reason why position is so important is because you think about it. You can't see their cards. They can't see your cards. But if you're in position, say pre-flop, you're in the big blind, you get to see everyone play and see if someone bets or if someone checks, folds. You get to see if they're weak or strong, or they're just trying to fool you. But at least you see the information there. But remember, when it turns around, the dealer is in the best position post-flop. So post-flop's after the three cards that come out. And then even the cutoff is the next guy to the right of the dealer. Both those positions, dealer and cutoff, they're your number one. They're where you should be playing most of your hands. So the reason why you should be playing most of your hands, just remember, because you see the way your opponents are playing. And sometimes your opponents will tell you when they're weak and you need to pick up on it. So if you're playing online, they might just check. It's as simple as that. Another thing too, if you're playing live poker, you'll see people looking away from the cards, talking to other people, not paying attention. This is showing disinterest. So you could actually put a little bit of pressure on these guys and they'll let go of the hand and just leave the table. Of course, everything is up for debate, because sometimes people actually understand that you can do these tells and then actually try and fool you. I actually sat at a tournament once and the guy had the absolute nuts, but what he did was he put a smoke in his ear, ready to get up and leave, trying to fool everyone into thinking he's just given up. So he actually shoved and hopefully wanted someone to call, and he was ready to get up and leave. But he just really wanted to double up in the tournament. It was a cheap trick, but nonetheless, it actually worked. It was pretty funny actually to see it uphand. Anyway, so position is really important. So you can play most of your hands, at the early stages, or in the late stages of position, sorry. So dealer and the cutoff. So what type of ranges should you be looking at? So when you're first starting off, ranges are a thing of what hands you should be playing. So the tighter you play is the better you'll become first, because you need to learn how to play with the aces, you need to learn how to play with kings, even pocket queens, pocket jacks. Usually aces and kings and queens, ace king, they're your premium type hands. They're the hands you should actually learn how to play. And from there, you should actually, it's usually small blinds under the gun. Under the gun's usually the first one to act after the big blind, which means they're the ones that get to see no action. They get to see no evidence of their hands before, so they get to choose whether or not to throw any chips in before anyone else. So sometimes that's very scary, and you should play less hands out of a position, because usually when you're playing in the blinds or under the gun, you're typically out of position, and if you don't have a strong hand, you could be just calling down with a lot of medium hands and losing a lot. So that's not ideal. So you should be playing more hands in position, tighten your range up, especially in the early stages of positions. So under the gun, the blinds, and just be aware that with the blinds, you always, majority of players, 99% of the players will be losing money in those positions. Even under the gun, a lot of people will be losing a lot of money under the gun because you don't have position. And sometimes, there's two things. You got position, but you got the cards. Sometimes you can't have both. And in tournaments, you can use position as, bluffing and don't have any hands. And the position plays itself. And you can actually just read other players by them showing weakness, and you just pick up on it and you make them fold, because any cards can win if everyone else folds. It doesn't really matter what you have there. Anyway, so you need to tighten up your range. So you can loosen up your range towards the end of the, from the dealer button, the cutoff. Hands that you can probably slow play a little bit, where you shouldn't be slow playing at all. Usually when you bet, you should be throwing in 3 big blinds. Usually it's always nice to throw plus 1 more blind on top of any limp callers as well. Limp callers will generally be fish, unless sometimes you do run into people that try to slow play you. So then what happens is they'll bet and then you try and raise, and then all of a sudden they'll put their hands together and raise you. And then you, after the, then you've got to guess what type of hands you're going to be playing after that. So a lot of hands you could be folding with, a lot of hands you can continue with. So some of the best hands in poker is the royal flush, obviously. So you could have ace something suited, like ace king suited. They can have your royal flush hands. That'd be really nice. Very rare to get a royal flush though, so just bear in mind. You can definitely get some flushes, but you have to learn how to play post flop. And once you play pre-flop and you're in position a lot more, and you can widen up your range towards the end of of the end of the position, you can work out what everyone's playing with. You can definitely start working out, is a flop a good flop or a bad flop for you? What is a flop? It's the 3 cards that are after all the betting done in the pre-flop. So the pre-flop was before the 3 cards come out, and then post-flop is when the 3 cards come out. So anyway, so then you just work out what your ranges can be. Sometimes I like to have ace 10 suited and above, so ace jack, ace queen, ace king. I like to have it, if I don't have a pocket pair, I like to at least be able to make a straight or a flush in my hand, and the higher the better, because if you go lower in a hand, you've got to be very careful with being dominated in a hand. So what I mean dominated with, you could have king 10 under the gun raises you call, and then they could have ace king, the board comes out, you hit your king, you think you're good, but you're not, and they just keep betting, and you just cold calling. Cold calling is just calling, not raising. And usually cold calling could be someone out of position generally. And then you go all the way to showdown to work out that you've got the second best hand. And that's not where anyone wants to be. And so that's why you tighten up your range. So you sort of don't get fooled into, falling into these second best hands. So when you first start, try and tighten up your range. When you start learning how to play a bit better, and you can read the people better, read the cards, if you're not, they're going to make a flush or a straight, or you can outplay your opponent's post flop, then you can start playing with weaker cards. But understand that there is a huge risk when you start playing weaker cards. And when you have a weaker card, like a weaker hand, generally, like even king 9, king 10, small pot is fine for a weak hand. So you've really got to keep an idea of where your hand strength's going to be. So, paired hands doesn't mean it's going to be a big hand. If you're playing a big hand, let's say the betting gets out of control, but you've only got a paired hand, you've got to start raising questions of, can I really win? Sometimes you could have ace king and the king hits on the flop, but you're playing such a big hand and a lot of people are in the hand, and you're playing above your means with that hand. Your hand does not have it's not the quality enough to actually play. And a lot of people will fall in love with top pair, top kicker type hands. They're great in heads up, but not great in multi-way. And this is one of the reasons why we bet pre-flop. So you got to understand what type of hands play well win with heads up, or one or two players compared to say four or five players, or even three to four or five players. Hands like ace suited hands are not bad when it's up against multiple players, just for the fact that you can trap a lot of players with flushes. So you could have the nut flush and people will have the king flush, queen flush, and you can definitely win a lot of money that way. And also, playing out of position, very scary, especially do not slow play out of position. Ace King offsuit is a great hand, but a lot of people hate Ace King because they don't know how to play it. You've got to really play very aggressive with Ace King, especially out of position, because the fact is you don't know what people are doing behind you, and you've got to charge them to be in possession, or in position with you. So you need to make sure you throw in enough chips in there, charge them, and make your money when you hit your king, and hopefully go heads up. If you multi-way pot, a lot of people will actually, will have two pair hands, will hit their set, will hit a flush, hit a straight. They're all trying to beat you. And sometimes getting the hands in early, like your aces and kings, ace king sometimes pre-flop, shoving it all in is the best thing. But then that's another mistake I see people do, is people just shoving all in. And you want people to actually call you pre-flop, especially when you've got the best hand. You don't want people to fold and you don't win anything. You don't want to be the person everyone folds to, but you're the one calling to second best hands. You don't want to be the one giving the money, and you want to be the one taking the money. So anyway, so you could have aces. Aces gets cracked a lot against three or four players quite easily. Heads up, it's something like 80% chance of winning, and it just drops down to like 60% chance against two other players, and you're an underdog against three other players. So it's quite funny how it just transfers so quickly, just the strength of your hand. Also the fact that, sometimes it's playing out of position. When you're in position, you're more likely to get paid a lot more. People will make mistakes, just calling you out of position as well. There's some exceptions to poker in position and out of position. So some hands are out of position, you can have a calling range to make yourself a little bit harder to play with. So sometimes you can have pocket pairs and you're actually calling someone that's in front of you, and you could be trying to set mine, which is just trying to hit you got pocket sevens, trying to hit your seven on the flop. You got a 1 in 7 chance there. So if they bet low enough, you can call and you can try and, hopefully a king comes out in the board, but your 7 comes out, and you can win a lot of money that way. And then you just got to learn how to play hands. There's a lot of forums out there for cards, how to play particular type of hands as well, which can definitely help. I can definitely watch my YouTube videos as well. That can help as well. And you just sort of get an idea of when people are talking about different hands, they can talk about different strategies that they're using, and just listen to the do's and don'ts and try not to, try and work out what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right, what's working for them. But sometimes what works for them doesn't work for you, because we're all different types of players. So that leads me to another thing. The types of players you'll find, you'll have, you've got your nits. So your nit players are someone that plays only aces and pretty much kings, and that's about it. Maybe ace king suited if you're lucky, but they play like really low percent hands. A lot of people play quite netish in the small blind and under the gun as well, because they're the worst positions to be in, especially post flop. And then you've got your tag players, so that's your tight aggressive players. Tight aggressive players will be someone who, it's probably the majority of solid players. They'll play like 16 to 20% of hands. So a lot of people will play ace 10 suited up. Pocket pairs usually as well. Just those type of hands. Get rid of the trash. That's one of the biggest things as well, is to get rid of trash hands. But yeah, that's your tight aggressive players. When they're good, they bet aggressive. When they're bad, they just get out of the way. Pretty simple thing to learn. Probably one of the first strategies you should learn to use is tight and aggressive player. So the next one is lag. So that's loose aggressive. I don't really think anyone that is new to poker should be using this one. Unless you're playing for play money, then you're just mucking around with it. But obviously you want to try and get into good habits when you're playing poker and then build from that, because you're building yourself up, building your game. People aren't playing against you, they're actually playing against your hands. But loose aggressive players will actually play a lot of suited connected type hands, any pocket pairs as well, and they can play it anywhere on the, they're more than happy to play these hands pretty much out of position as well, and they get really tricky to play against. And when they're when they're deeper stacked, that's where the magic really happens for them, and they can actually lose a lot of money there as well. So if you're not able to work out if you've got the nuts, the nuts hands, like maybe you've got a full house compared to a flush that's out there or a straight, you can lose a lot of money, but you can actually gain a lot of money being able to tell if your player's actually got second best hands that are willing to pay heaps and can't let go of their hands. But anyway, you got lags, you got fish. Fish are just playing any two cards, don't really know what they're doing, just throw bets in. Typically slow playing as well, and that's one thing you don't want to do. And you don't want to slow play your big hands. So one of the biggest problems for beginners, you don't want to play slow hands. You don't want to, you might have pocket aces. Same reason what I said, you want to actually bet and make sure that they, charge them to beat you and get you post flop. Another thing too is if you've got a set, you might have pocket sevens, you hit your 7, you've got your set, you don't want to slow play it because there could be a flush or a straight around the corner. You don't want to slow play, make sure you bet in proportion of the pot, usually half size, 3/4 of the size. This is generally normal. Sometimes there's an exception, you can check raise, which means you're checking for trapping and then they bet and then you re-raise. But there's all types of little tricks there, especially if someone bets on the turn and then you raise on the turn. Sometimes you can get, all being on the flop. If you can raise on the flop after they've bet, sometimes they check to you on the turn. It can be a really sneaky way to get a cheap river, which if you're trying to get draws, could definitely work as well. And that's why position is very important as well. So position is so important because you can get free cards, you can see your hand strength, you get paid a lot more. So that's where your money is from your dealer to the cutoff. Then you got hijack, which is mediocre position. It's not too bad. And then after that, you've got like under the gun +1, depending if you're playing. Depends if you're playing with a full ring or not. So a full ring would be 9 players. 6 is typically my favorite because that's where you can play a lot of hands. A lot of people like playing heads up poker, which is pretty scary because you can play 80% of your hands because there's only 2 players to beat. So that's the reason why. A lot of people, when they first start playing as well, they will bluff way too much as well. They will just overly bluff and they don't know when to bluff properly. So when you should bluff, I typically like the semi-bluff, which means if someone calls your bluff, you can actually make the best hand on the river. So if you just, sometimes you can bluff with there. If you've got like the worst hand ever, you're not going to win on showdown. Sometimes just throwing a bet out there because you want them to fold because they've been checking to you, showing weakness. That is fine, but just don't fall in love with the hand. Just understand the moves that you're playing. So yeah, just trying to understand your hand strengths compared to everyone else is probably the best way to go. Play a bit tighter, not too loose. Position is the best and important thing ever. Don't slow play. Learn bankroll management quite early as well. So in proportion of your buy-ins, you should have at least starting out 50 buy-ins per your level, plus even more. Don't be afraid to, if you're beating a level, sometimes stay at that level until you accumulate enough cash to be safe enough. Go to the next level and not be scared to, just take your time. If something's working, don't have to break it or try and change it. Just keep going with it until, you feel confident to go to the next level. And that's typically enough to where you don't have to think about whether or not you lose 10 buy-ins, you could still play at that level and you feel confident. So bankroll management plays a huge role in poker. There's a lot of mental fatigue that happens with money. People fall in love with hands. They don't want to let go of hands. People can be really, really desperate when they're playing out of their means. They're playing a bankroll, oh, they're playing a buy-in that's way too above their pay grade. So they could be falling too many hands down because they've put too many chips in and they don't want to lose. So what else is there? So there's bankroll management. There's tilt. So tilt is what keeps the poker world moving along. So without tilt, it'd be a pretty boring game actually. So tilt is very hard to control. So sometimes when you're first starting out, you got to learn and understand that even the best hands will get beat. Those 2% chance to win against you will come out. There will be coolers, which is a cooler is like if you've got pocket sevens, you hit a set, you got set sevens, you run into someone with set nines or tens, and you just lose. And there's not much you can do there. Or let's say you've got king queen suited type hands and you run into an ace jack suited type hand, and the way it was played was a bit deceiving, but just a cooler because both people were chasing. And that type of thing happens all the time. Okay, sometimes you can make a straight, and then towards the river, they get their flush on the river, but at least you charge them. The tilt plays a huge role in our game. There's heaps of levels, types. There's heaps of tilt. There's desperation tilt. So when you're playing outside your means, you could be just really just hanging on tight, or just trying to hold on to a bad hand. Just you don't want to lose, and you're trying to be in denial against the hand. What else was there? There was entitlement tilt. Entitlement tilt is someone who thinks they know everything about poker, which means, and they've got more experience than you, and they think because they have more experience than you, they're entitled to beat you. And it's just not the case. The cards actually will beat them, whether they like it or not. Whether or not the player beats them is a different story, but just because you're entitled, you feel entitled, does not mean you're going to win a game. And that means the same thing to you. If you sit down and you're sitting down full of sharks or really good players, the sharks are good players. They try and eat the fish alive. Doesn't mean they're going to beat you. If you get the cards going your way, you could beat anyone. Just look at Jamie Gold towards, I think it was the 2006 a World Series of Poker. That was an amazing run. That was one of the best runs he's ever done. Anyway, that was Jamie Gold. He won that extremely strong that year. No matter what he did, the cards were just going his way, and it was undefeatable. And this is why poker was so popular, especially in the noughties. It was just so big. And you had recreational player, Honeymaker. I'm not even sure if that was his name, but he actually come from nowhere and just won millions of dollars. And it sort of told anyone that wanted to play poker could win anything. It's like winning the lottery. So it was fun. Anyway, so tilt. So back to tilt. So what else have you got? You got run bad tilt. So you can, you could be playing your best poker of your life and you're just running bad constantly. And the best way is probably overcome run bad is probably just to remember just to get out of the way when you have the worst hands. You could have the best hand on the flop, but the turnout after the turn and the river, you get punished. And the best way to probably deal with these types of tilt is probably just thinking, did I play the best way? Did I allow the free card? Did I call when I shouldn't have called? Was I in position? Ask really important questions whether or not you should be in the hand or not. Okay? And then you can work out that way. So injecting logic is probably the best way to fight tilt. So you've got to actually think about, am I playing above my means? Should I lower the buying level that I'm in? Also, should I be tightening up my ranges? Am I opening up my ranges? I also identify when you're getting tilted, identify your weaknesses. Also, when you're in a session, if you're able to, really check out what you're doing wrong in those positions. So if you're really angry or frustrated in poker, take it as an opportunity to learn yourself what type of player you are, like what bad tendencies do you have. And also, once you start doing bad plays, you can actually identify when you're on tilt. So that's actually quite sneaky. So you could actually be on tilt and actually learn it because you're actually opening your ranges up too much. You're breaking your own rules. There is times when you should break rules and when you shouldn't. But it's up to you to work out when you shouldn't and when you should. It all comes down to experience. What other tilts are there? There's also what other tilts are there? I don't even know now. There's 7 tilts anyway of the deadlies. But anyway, inject logic is the best way for it. Just remember, poker's gonna be around tomorrow. You can't you can't be a poker champion in a day. You can definitely lose your entire bankroll in a day though. Just remember that, keep that in mind. Any other things? Just to summarize, this is the first podcast I have. Anyway, to summarize, tighten up your range. Remember the type of players. Position is the most important thing ever. Remember there's tilt. Probably look at the mistakes that you're doing. So analyzing your hands is probably key. Try and get feedback from experienced players or in the poker community that might be able to help you. A lot of players do actually understand a lot more theory, but they don't have the experience to back it up. So that means when they're playing the poker tables, they don't actually show what they've learned on the tables because they haven't mastered it. So there is quite a few different levels of mastery. So you don't know what you don't know, and then there's something there, but you still don't know it, but you're aware that you don't know it. And then you actually know something, and then you're actually learning to do it. And then there's actually unconditional, you can actually know how to do something without even thinking about it. So often I'll play multi-tables. I don't even have to think about the hand sometimes. That's why I can multi-table, because I can talk about one hand totally and just back up and just play quite easily on the other table without thinking too hard, because I've played those hands a million times. I know what I'm doing, so you can get carried away that way. But yeah, just know your limits. Good luck, guys. This was the first podcast. Pretty fun. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. And I'll see you next podcast, hopefully. See you, bye.